Candace, we have an order for a fire truck just like this one. It's for a new customer and they want to make sure they can fit all their equipment on their truck along with a generator, but not overload the axles. Do you think you can do the axle weight calculations if I give you the data?
Sure. If you have time right now, let's look over the data together. I will also need equations and a quick explanation on how to use them.
Rated axle weights are important for three reasons. First of all, the suppliers of axles rate the carrying capacity of their axles so they don't fail and that the brakes attached to the axle are sufficient. The second reason is that the federal government requires an OEM, original equipment manufacturer, like Pierce, to specify the rated axle capacities, and they cannot be exceeded. Lastly, the customer tells Pierce that they want to carry in terms of water and equipment, so those loads are also calculated in the final rated axle capacities. The customer is buying a standard pumper and it will have a maximum front axle rating of 12,000 pounds. The rear axle rating will be 20,000 pounds. We need to know if these axle capacities will allow them to carry the necessary water and equipment, otherwise they will have to spend more money and get the heavy-duty version of this truck.
So let me see what you have for component weights and their locations on the truck. The table shows 8 weight considerations. I see that you also have the distance from the CG from the front axle for each of these. What exactly does CG mean?
CG stands for the center of gravity. It is the center of mass for each object. In other words, it is the point at which the item would be perfectly balanced. Candace, note that we are looking at the truck at the side view. We are assuming that all these components from the rear of the truck are balanced down the center of the truck. Let me explain how the equations work that will tell us the weight on each axle. We must find the weight of each item on the rear axle, and then we can determine the weight component on the front axle. In other words, you multiply the weight of the item times the distance the CG is from the front axle, and then divide the total by the wheelbase. The wheelbase is the distance in inches between the center of the front axle and the center of the rear axle.
So let me try to see how the equipment weight is divided between the two axles.
Well, Candace, did you get all the weights calculated?
Yes, I got all the weights calculated for each of the components and then I totaled up the axle weights. Next, I compared these totals against the rated axle ratings and found that the calculated weights are much less than the rated axle ratings, so our customers have plenty of capacity in case they would want to add some weights in the future.
That is great news, Candace, and I will let the customer know that their standard fire truck configuration is going to work. As you recall, they were concerned that the generator they wanted to add at the very last minute may cause the axle loads to get too high. So now they will not have to spend any extra funds to buy a chassis with higher rated axles. Having actual axle weights below the published limits will also make sure that we pass the federal weight laws that these trucks need to comply with. Thank you, Candace.
You're welcome.